Hello and welcome to Matrix Tutorials number 4. This week we're going to see how to perform a successful migration towards OpenID Connect based authentication, even if your Synapse was already running and allowing password based authentication and registration. If you are not familiar with it but interested, OpenID Connect is one kind of single sign-on or SSO. When enterprises use or sell a group of services, it is good practice to have single sign-on, a single account you can use for all the services. Matrix is no exception and supports several kinds of SSO. To put it simply, OpenID Connect is one kind of SSO. We're going to deploy a playground environment with an instance of Synapse and Authentik, an OpenID provider which also acts as a directory of user, both served behind a reverse proxy which handles certificates automatically for us. The playground also populates both Synapse and Authentik with users. Some users will exist on both systems, some only in one, some will have a matching username, and some won't. We will see how to dump users from Synapse, how to dump them from Authentik, how to do reconciliation using a spreadsheet, and how to push the changes in Synapse so it knows which Matrix account correspond to which account from the SSO. Let's get started! So the first thing to do is to go to the tutorial OIDC playground repository under the matrix-org organization. I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can find it easily. This repository is mostly the playbook that is going to deploy all the services and that is going to populate them with users. Just a note on the prerequisites. This has been tested on Rocky Linux 9 and it should work on most Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivatives, so that is Rocky Linux and CentOS mostly. You need to have a fresh vanilla server with nothing installed so the playbook can run properly and deploy everything it needs. For example, Docker is something that is going to be conflicting directly because the playbook relies on Podman. You also need to get a domain name. In my case, I'm going to use ChipChop, but it does not need to be, it can be a subdomain. So for example, it could be playground.example.org. You need to set a record for that domain to point to your server, and you need two CNAME records. You need matrix.yourbasedomain and login.yourbasedomain to point to the A record you just set. So the first thing to do is to clone the repository, and for that we're just going to use our favorite terminal and do a git clone. Git is going to clone and I can go into the repository. First thing to do, I'm going to show you that in Firefox. The inventory is the basic one. So the playground describes all the servers we have in our set. In our case, we only have one. You just need to update this to your base domain, where your server is actually. And this directory in host vars, you need to rename it. Here it's playground.example.org, and it needs to be your domain. So in my case, we will do it right away. I'm going to edit the inventory playground, and it's going to be, in my case, chipchop.org. Another thing I did not mention, we are going to assume that you have root access on the server and you already have done the SSH copy ID to authenticate as root. This is not something clean, this is not something you would do in production, but keep in mind it's just a playground environment and we want to get something deployed pretty quickly. So I'm going to the inventory and I'm going to host vars. And I'm going to rename playground with chipchop.org. So I'm then going to go inside that directory and I'm going to edit the file, the YAML file called vars. So we have several things here. The first one is use Let's Encrypt production CA. Let's Encrypt is what allows us to have the certificates to get the S in HTTPS. It's fairly nice to have a free service to do that, but they have rate limiting. So you need to be really sure about what you are going to do before using the production authority, because if you are rate limited, you can spend a few days without being able to retrieve certificates. So to begin with, we are not going to use the production one, but the staging one to make sure that everything can be deployed fairly well. And then we are going to use the production one to get actual certificates that are going to be usable. You have a Let's Encrypt email field. You need to update it with an actual email. Let's Encrypt is not going to allow you to retrieve certificates if you have an example.com domain in the mail domain. So for the domains, just a reminder that you need to set the records, and then you can update your base domain. So I'm just going before that to update the Let's Encrypt email. So in my case, it's going to be mail@chipchop.org. My base domain is going to be chipchop.org. Then we have a section about Synapse. We need to run a command to generate a password. So I'm going to do that in a terminal just next to this. Here I am. So I have a password. The super admin is we are going to create an administrator user, a matrix user for Synapse when we populate the Synapse instance. You can keep that login. You can create another one if you want. It does not really matter. We're going to give a password to that user. So for that, I'm just going to generate another password in the terminal I have next to that. Here it is. So I can update it. I'm going to leave aside the OIDC client ID and OIDC client secret. We will see just a bit later in the video how to use them. We will fiddle a little with Authentik to allow Synapse to use it, and we will see why it matters and how to use them. Then for Authentik, we're going to do a bit of the same. So we are going to generate a password for the database. Here I am. I have a password for the database. I'm going to create a bootstrap password. So this is a very handy feature of Authentik. It allows you to set a password by default for the admin user, which is very handy and useful in the playbook to be able to generate the users. For the secret key, same thing. So secret key is a secret shared by all the Authentik users, well, all the Authentik instance. So Authentik has an architecture with a server and several workers, and they need to share a same secret to trust each other. And finally, the last one is the access token that we can pre-generate as well, which I'm going to do. This is useful to perform the API calls to be able to populate Authentik with users. So here we are. I have my inventory that is set up. I'm going to get back to the directory to follow the README and make sure I have all the steps. So prerequisites, it's okay. I had set the records beforehand. Inventory playground, this is done. Rename the playground, this is done. Filling it and leave client ID and client secret, this is done. So then the playbook is going to do all the magic for us, and we are just going to copy that command and paste it to the terminal. So if you're not really familiar with Ansible, Ansible is a sort of recipe, and you tell it where you want to apply it. So the recipe describes the desired state you want the server to be in. This is the content of the sandbox.yaml file, and the inventory is where I want that recipe to be applied. And then we can use tags to narrow which steps of the recipe we want to apply. In our case, we are going to focus on the install first to get the installation of Synapse and its database, Authentik and all its dependencies, the reverse proxy, and that's mostly it. A quick edit to jump in the future, because the playbook can take a little while to play entirely. You should not have any failure or unreachable or whatever. You should only have OK and changed status for the tasks in the playbook. One thing we can do is we can open Firefox and go to login.yourdomain.org, and we're going to get a warning about a security issue. This is perfectly normal. This is because we are using the Let's Encrypt staging authority. So Firefox does not trust it. This is on purpose. But if we accept the risk and continue, so we trust the certificate because we know it's normal that it's an untrusted certificate, we are going to land on the authentication page of Authentik. All right, so we can fix that now by going back to the terminal and editing the environment variables. So it's going to be in inventory, host vars, your domain, vars, and here, use Let's Encrypt prediction CA, we can set it to true. All right, and we can play the playbook again. So Traefik should now be using the certification, the production certification authority of Let's Encrypt. So it's going to renew the certificates for us. It's going to try to get new ones, answer the challenge, and replace the certificate with production ones. It can take a bit of time, so don't worry, don't panic if you have some errors. If you keep having some certificate errors in your browser, it can be perfectly normal. Let's have a look in Firefox. So we're going to have a look at login.chipjob.org, and now we have a valid certificate, and we can see the authentication page of Authentik, which is great news. And we're going to do the same with matrix.chipjob.org, and we have Synapse running, which is great news as well. Now we're going to follow with the tutorial. So what we're going to do is we're going to add users to Synapse, add users to Authentik. You can see a little table of how it's going to look like. So we have a user who has the same username in both services. We have a user who is present in both services with the same email but different username. We have one who is only present in Synapse, and we have one who is only present in Authentik. So let's ask the playbook to play that for us by typing the command, enter, go ahead, do your thing. So behind the scenes, the playbook is just calling the APIs. You can explore the playbook. It's just YAML if you want to have a quick look at it. This was performed perfectly. If you want to have a quick look, we can go in Firefox. This is going to be the simplest in Authentik. The login, how to log in. The default admin is akadmin for Authentik, and the password, we actually provided the password. It's in the inventory playground, not in the playground, in the host vars, your domain vars, and this is the Authentik bootstrap password. So if I copy it from the file and I go there, I can go to the admin interface, to the directory, and I can see the users, and I have indeed Mr. Baxter, Mr. Adams, and Ms. Jemison, which I am supposed to have in Authentik. Okay, so that's good. Let's move on to the next section, connecting Synapse to Authentik. So we're going to create a provider and an application for it. So this is a particularity of Authentik. You need to create a OAuth2 provider for Authentik, and you need to create an application to allow access to that provider. It's implementation details, so we are just going to do it as it's meant to be. We're going to go to application, provider, create a new one. We're just going to create a OAuth2 OpenID provider. We're going to name it Synapse. Please name it Synapse exactly, because the playbook assumes that the application is named Synapse. If you name it another way, it's not going to work. We can see several fields. The two that are going to be of interest for us are the client ID, which I'm going to copy. I'm going to go to the terminal, still in the environment variables, not environment, but variables files, and I'm going to paste it for the client ID line, and I'm going to do the same thing, uncomment, and do the same with the client secret. So I'm retrieving them, saving. All right, and then we can finish up and write the redirect URI. So if you are not sure what to put, the good thing is there is good documentation for Synapse. So Synapse configuration guide is a good resource. If you go to user authentication OpenID Connect, there is a authentic section and we have the redirect URI. So it's your public base URL / Synapse client or OIDC callback. This is what I provided here, and there is no need to fiddle with anything else. We're just going to save the provider this way. Then we can create the application. The application is going to be named Synapse as well. The slug is what actually matters because the playbook is assuming that Synapse is the slug for this application. No need to fiddle with the group. The provider is going to be the one we just created. And we can leave the rest of the fields empty because there is a mechanism, well-known files, to allow Synapse to discover how Authentik works. So we can just click on create and we can get back to the terminal. So in the terminal, what happened? We have just uncommented two variables, which are Synapse OIDC client ID and Synapse OIDC client secret. I'm going to give you a little trick and get in the internals of the playbook. If we go to roles, Synapse, template, home server YAML, we can see the YAML file that is going to be deployed to configure the Synapse. And we have a block here that is only deployed if client ID and client secrets are defined. So it's going to add this little OIDC providers block to the configuration of Synapse. So we are going to need to redeploy it. And if you want to learn more about it, the interesting part is if you go to configuration manual, you can look up OIDC providers and you have a list of all the options. Now, if you look at what we have in the playbook, we have just the defaults, the very basic. So IDP ID is going to be a string to identify the OpenID provider is in Synapse, because we can have several OpenID providers connected to Synapse. IDP name is just going to be a display name for the OpenID provider that is going to be displayed to the user. Discover means Synapse can do some magic for us to understand how Authentik works. The issuer is where I insisted on the slug, because the Synapse here should be the same as in Authentik. This is basically who the tokens are for. Client ID and client secret, this is what we copied. Scopes, if you are playing with OpenID Connect, I assume you are familiar with scopes. But basically, this is what Synapse can access, the user information that Synapse does have access, that Authentik is going to allow Synapse to access. Profile and email are standard claims. OpenID is necessary to get OpenID Connect tokens. Profile and email are standard claims that are going to give us access, standard scopes that are going to give us access to several standard claims that we can then use. And we are going to use them in the user mapping provider. So what is interesting is we have two lines, the local template and the display name template. The local part template is what we are going to use from the information we got from the user. So we are going to be using the preferred username, which is a standard claim in OpenID Connect, to generate the local part of the user on Synapse. And to generate the display name, we're going to use So we're going to use the name claim, which is standard as well, and capitalize it. All right, so this is working. Let's see how it looks like in practice. So we're going to go to, for example, staging.element.io. We just want a matrix client and we want to sign in. We're not going to sign into matrix.org because we just have deployed our own server. So we want to sign in on chipchop.org. And we can see we have the username, password, and sign-in field, but we also have the continue with my company button. So if we click that continue with my company, by the way, my company is just the display name of the SSO. We can put any string we want here. If we click on that, we're going to Authentik. So now I'm authenticated as AK admin, Authentik admin. This is obviously not something I want to log in as. I could impersonate users. This is one of the nice features of Authentik. If I go to the admin interface, I can go to the directory, I can go to the users, and for example, let's say I really want some British humor in my life, so I'm going to impersonate Douglas Adams. I can go to staging.element.io, sign in, chipjob.org, continue with my company, and ta-da, I'm Douglas Adams. All right, so we can see it works. Now we're going to see how to do some reconciliation of accounts. So for that, we're going to call the Synapse admin API to dump the users from Synapse, and we're going to call the Authentik users API to dump the users from Authentik. We're going to have two CSV files. We are going to do some reconciliation in the spreadsheet, which is going to produce a third CSV file for us, which we will use to push the changes in Synapse using the admin API with Python again. So let's get started. Actually, when doing the editing of the video, I realized it was 20 minutes long already, which is quite long, and I don't want to rush the main part, the most important one, which is the reconciliation of accounts. So we are going to keep our playground for this week, and we are going to do the actual reconciliation next week and cover every step. See you next week.